Good evening, friends. As the world around you quiets down, let's take a soft journey together. A journey through time to a place where innovation met necessity and where technology began to whisper its secrets in the dark. Tonight, we'll slip into the stillness of a night during World War II, when Britain, standing on the edge of survival, would come to rely on a quiet and mysterious force that watched the skies, unseen yet ever present. Dim your lights and settle into your favorite corner, the one where you feel most at peace. Perhaps you just wrapped yourself in a warm blanket, feeling the cool evening air around you. Maybe the faintest hum of a nearby fan adds to the gentle atmosphere. Or perhaps you're listening in the quiet solitude of your own thoughts. Wherever you are, let this space be one of calm, where we can explore history not in the rush of drama, but in the calm, deliberate pace of a slow, winding story. If you find this journey soothing, if these gentle whispers of history help guide you into rest, tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. There's no pressure here. Only the soft cadence of shared stories told with warmth and care. So let your mind ease into the night and let's begin our journey through time. The evening air is cool, with just a hint of moisture, like a fresh breath before the coming of dawn. As the sun slips below the horizon, the world around you begins to quiet, as if holding its breath. The gentle rustling of leaves can be heard as a soft wind stirs through the trees, and all seems still, peaceful, almost serene. But in this stillness, there is something hidden, something alive with anticipation, waiting for the moment it will make its presence known. You may not be able to see it, but in the distance, on the southern coast of England, towering radar towers stand like sentinels against the darkening sky. These quiet structures, often unnoticed by the passerby, are the harbingers of a change about to unfold. Imagine standing near one of these towers. The air is thick with tension, yet the stillness is profound. You might hear the soft crackling of static in the air, a signal, faint at first, yet growing steadily louder, humming softly like an unseen pulse. To the untrained eye, these towers might look like little more than tall metal poles, rustling softly in the wind. But in the silence of this evening, these towers are doing something far more extraordinary. They are listening. They are reaching out into the darkness, probing the skies above. Every pulse, every wave sent out into the night is a quiet act of defiance against the darkness that is looming ever closer. This is the birth of radar, a technology that was as new as it was untested. Something few could truly grasp, but all would come to rely on. It wasn't just the physical towers, the wires and machines. It was the potential, the quiet hope that somehow these signals could predict the coming of danger long before it was visible to the naked eye. It was a force that could help Britain defend itself from the skies, to know where the enemy was before they could be seen. And it all started here, in the stillness of the evening, beneath the hum of the radar towers. The technology was still in its infancy in the late 1930s. The world had yet to understand how to harness the power of radio waves to reveal what lay hidden beyond sight. Imagine the world at that time. A world not yet accustomed to the vast, invisible web of information that today surrounds us. It was like stepping into a dark room with only the faintest of lights to guide you, unsure of where the walls were, unsure of what lay ahead. Yet, in this quiet darkness, a group of British scientists, engineers and visionaries were already beginning to build something that would forever change the course of history. But in those early days, radar wasn't perfect. Far from it. It was more of a hunch, an experiment that might or might not work. Imagine standing on the edge of something unknown, something so far removed from your everyday life that it might as well be magic. These pioneers were navigating the great unknown, not unlike sailors venturing into uncharted waters. They knew the stakes were high, and yet they pressed on, inching closer to something miraculous. Let me tell you, at first, it wasn't so dramatic. No huge crowds cheered, no grand speeches were given. It was simply quiet men and women in dimly lit rooms, standing before strange instruments that beeped and crackled, trying to make sense of the signals. These were humble beginnings, and yet, from this quiet struggle, came something world-changing. They didn't yet know it, but these first steps would soon make the difference between victory and defeat for an entire nation. As the days passed and the machines were refined, radar began to show its potential. Picture this: the hum of a machine, steady and rhythmic, as operators sit, peering at their screens, eyes fixed on the shifting blips that appear on the radar. The screen is alive with dots, each one representing an aircraft, some close, some far away, but all traveling with a purpose. The operators could see the invisible, the things that were once hidden in the clouds or the miles of dark sky. It was like a new sense, a vision beyond the ordinary, a way to know exactly what was out there before it even arrived. Now, imagine you are one of these operators. You sit in front of your screen, the soft flicker of light illuminating your face. You hear the faint hum of the machine, a sound almost like a lullaby, but one filled with urgency. Every second matters, and yet there is a calmness in the room, an unspoken understanding that you are doing something critical, something that will change the fate of a nation. You wait, you listen. Your fingers hover over the controls, ready to respond at the first sign of danger. And then it happens. A signal, a blip. It's faint at first, but growing steadily stronger, inching closer, just on the edge of detection. The operators know what it is. An incoming enemy aircraft, coming closer with each passing moment. Without radar, this blip would have been impossible to detect. Without this silent sentinel, Britain would have remained unaware of the threat until it was almost too late. But now, with radar, the operators can warn the Royal Air Force. The skies are no longer a mystery. They are a map, a chart that can be read and navigated, all thanks to this quiet, unseen force. It's hard to imagine the relief this brought. Think of it like being in a dark forest, blindfolded, with only the sounds of the night to guide you. But then, out of nowhere, a friendly voice calls out, pointing the way forward. That's what radar did for Britain. It allowed the RAF to intercept enemy bombers and fighters long before they were in range, giving the pilots the upper hand. Now, let's take a step back and think for a moment. What would it be like to be one of the scientists, the engineers, the operators, who helped create and refine this technology? These were the unsung heroes, the quiet minds who worked tirelessly, with little recognition, to make something extraordinary happen. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy. Yet, their work would make all the difference in the world. And as the sun began to rise on those early mornings, the radar stations became the eyes of Britain. Their quiet, vigilant watch over the skies would soon prove to be the key to winning the Battle of Britain. But for now, the radar towers stood silently, knowing that their time was coming. The gentle hum of technology, the quiet pulse of radio waves, was about to change the course of history. As the day breaks, the night stillness begins to fade into the soft light of dawn. The horizon stretches wide, a gentle wash of pale blue and pink as the first light touches the earth. the quiet of the night is replaced by the distant sounds of early morning. The rustling of leaves, the first chirps of birds beginning their day, and the soft hum of life slowly coming to life again. Yet, even as the world outside stirs, inside the radar stations, something else is quietly unfolding. Just beyond the reach of the waking world, you can almost imagine it. The faint glow of a small, dim light illuminating the faces of the operators as they sit, eyes trained on the radar screens before them. The air in these rooms is thick with a sense of anticipation, but there is no rush, no sense of panic, just a steady, quiet vigilance as the radar beams pulse out into the sky once more, searching, listening for any sign of movement. In those early days of radar, there was no real fanfare. There were no large, noisy celebrations when the radar operators detected their first aircraft. No great cheers when the radar showed the first blips that would change the course of the war. It was, in many ways, like a quiet guardian watching over the skies, knowing its purpose, but not calling attention to itself. It had one job, one silent duty, to alert those below when danger was near. Imagine standing in that room now. The whir of machines surrounds you, the soft buzz of the radar's hum filling the space. It's a gentle, almost soothing sound, the kind that fades into the background of your mind as you settle into your work. The operators are young, many of them just beginning their training, yet they take to the task with an almost instinctive precision. It's as though they can feel the pulses of the radar in their bones. The blips on the screen are like whispers, hints of things unseen, and the operators learn to interpret these signals with a skill that, at first, they didn't know they had. But radar, in its early days, was more art than science. The machines were rudimentary at best, and yet they worked. They began to show patterns in the sky, helping the RAF pilots see the enemy long before they could be spotted by the naked eye. This, in turn, gave them the upper hand in a battle that, in many ways, was fought in the shadows, unseen by the majority of the British people. Only a handful of people, the ones in those small, dimly lit rooms, truly understood just how much was at stake. The operators, those quiet heroes in the radar rooms, were the ones who helped guide the RAF to victory. Without them, the Battle of Britain would have been much darker, its outcome far more uncertain. But in the soft, steady hum of the radar's pulse, these operators kept watch over the skies, alert to every flicker and change on the radar screens. They were the unseen protectors, and in their quiet vigilance, they played a role in winning a war. As the first aircraft blips appeared on the radar, the operators' minds worked quickly, interpreting the signals with the precision they had honed in their training. It was a delicate balance, one that required absolute focus and calm. Any misinterpretation of the signals could lead to disaster, but the operators had learned to trust the radar, to trust their instincts, and to remain calm in the face of growing tension. Think of it as a game of chess. Only this game was played in the air, with lives on the line, and every move counted. The radar operators were the strategists, the ones who saw the enemy's moves long before the first aircraft could be spotted by the human eye. The radar's pulse was their guide, its soft hum a constant reminder that, no matter how dark the sky became, there was always a way to see the unseen. One of the most fascinating aspects of this silent battle was the way the radar operators worked in tandem with the RAF pilots. The pilots relied on the radar to tell them where the enemy was, but the radar operators also relied on the pilots to verify what they saw. It was a symbiotic relationship, one built on trust and precision, with both sides depending on each other to ensure the safety of the nation. Imagine the tension in those moments when a blip appeared on the screen, signaling an incoming threat. The operators would pass the information along to the RAF, their voices calm but urgent, and in turn, the RAF pilots would take to the skies, armed with the knowledge of the enemy's location, ready to intercept the threat before it could reach its target. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience, coordination, and above all, trust. But the radar operators weren't just reading the blips on the screen. They were learning to recognize patterns, to understand what each blip meant. Was it an enemy bomber heading toward London? Or perhaps a squadron of fighters coming in to escort the bombers? Each type of aircraft had its own signature on the radar, its own unique pattern. And over time, the operators became experts at reading these patterns and knowing what was coming long before the enemy could be seen. You might imagine, in the silence of those rooms, there was something almost meditative about the work. The radar's hum was steady, like the pulse of the earth itself, and the operators would lose themselves in the rhythm of it. It wasn't about the adrenaline of combat, the rush of battle. It was about patience, precision, and trust. They knew their job well. They knew that every signal they sent out, every bit of data they read, could save lives. The quiet nature of their work is something to reflect on. In a world filled with loud, dramatic moments, it's easy to forget how often history's greatest shifts occur in silence, in stillness. The radar towers, the operators sitting in their dark rooms, the hum of the radar, they were all part of the unseen force that turned the tide of the Battle of Britain. No one outside knew the full scope of what they were doing, but without them, victory would have been a much harder thing to reach. And yet, despite the importance of their work, the radar operators were largely anonymous. They didn't wear uniforms, they weren't celebrated on the front pages of newspapers, and they didn't receive the accolades they deserved. But in their quiet, unwavering commitment, they became the foundation on which the Battle of Britain stood. And perhaps, in some ways, that quiet anonymity made their work all the more heroic. Now, let's take a moment to think about the world outside the radar rooms. The sky above Britain was a battleground, one where every moment brought new danger, new challenges. The RAF pilots, flying high above the clouds, could see nothing at all, only the vast, endless expanse of the sky. But with the radar operators guiding them, with their quiet, steady hands on the pulse of the radar, the pilots had an advantage they would not otherwise have had. They knew where to look, when to strike, and how to protect their country. And so, as the radar hummed its steady rhythm, and as the operators in their rooms kept watch, Britain stood ready. It wasn't just the pilots in the sky who would win the battle. It was the quiet heroes on the ground, the ones who saw the invisible and helped turn the tide with nothing more than the soft pulse of radar waves. The soft murmur of the night is now a distant memory, and in its place, the steady hum of the radar stations fills the air. The rooms are dim, but the operator's eyes, sharp and focused, flicker between their radar screens, searching the skies for any sign of an incoming threat. The day is starting to take shape, and though the early hours still hold a hint of quiet, the hum of activity is beginning to rise. It's as if the very air around them is charged with the anticipation of what's to come. Imagine standing in one of these radar rooms. The cool breeze from an open window ruffles the edges of a nearby map, and you can hear the soft rustle of paper as you lay it flat. It's a moment of calm, the kind that happens when the world feels like it's slowing down, yet the tension in the air suggests otherwise. You're aware somehow that something is about to change, something is about to shift, and you, with your trained eyes and steady hands, are the one holding the line between chaos and control. The British radar network, known as Chain Home, is now fully operational. It's an intricate system of towers, each one standing like a sentinel, silently sweeping the skies for any sign of an enemy aircraft. These radar stations, often set in remote areas, work in harmony, creating a network that stretches from the southern coast all the way up to Scotland. Each pulse of the radar is a whisper to the air, a message sent out into the ether, looking for something to return. At first, the towers seemed like quiet beacons, like sentries standing watch over the landscape. The work of the operators was almost meditative, like watching the world through a foggy window, waiting for the first shift in the pattern. But now, the game has changed. The soft hum of the radar is no longer just a background noise. It's become a vital lifeline. With each passing hour, the RAF pilots rely more and more on the radar's silent guidance, their lives and the fate of the nation hanging on these quiet signals. In those early days, the radar was seen as a curiosity, something that might give a small advantage, but nothing too significant. But as the Battle of Britain raged on, it became clear that this technology was much more than just a tool. It was the key to survival. And as the tension in the skies grew, the radar operators became more crucial, their roles growing ever more vital. Imagine the growing urgency in those radar rooms as the first signs of enemy aircraft begin to appear on the screens. The operators have learned to read the signals like seasoned musicians reading a score, each blip a note in a symphony that only they can hear. The radar is their instrument, and they are the silent conductors of this invisible orchestra. With each wave, with each pulse, they send out a message, a signal to the RAF pilots to prepare, to ready themselves for the battle above. The radar towers themselves have become a lifeline. They stand tall and firm against the rising storm. Each one is a symbol of resilience, a constant in a world that is shifting and changing. But it's not just the towers themselves, it's the people behind them, the radar operators, the engineers, the technicians, who have created something that no one thought possible. They've given Britain a way to see the unseen, a way to know when danger is approaching before it even reaches the horizon. There's something profoundly humbling about this shift in the battle. At first, the radar operators were almost invisible. After all, their work took place in the background, in dimly lit rooms far from the front line. But as the Battle of Britain continued, their role became more and more significant. They were the unseen heroes, the ones who guided the RAF pilots with nothing more than the soft, steady pulse of radar waves. Without them, the pilots would have been flying blind, with no way of knowing when the enemy was coming or where to strike. Imagine how it must have felt to be one of these radar operators. They had the power to see what no one else could see, to give the pilots the information they needed to turn the tide of battle. And yet, they remained in the background, their work often going unnoticed by the public. It's almost as if they were living in the shadows, their contributions so vital yet so quiet that no one truly understood the full extent of their importance. But in the radar rooms, the operators knew. They knew that every signal they intercepted, every plane they helped track, was making a difference. Each moment, each decision, was a chance to protect the skies, to give the pilots the advantage they needed to defend their homeland. And as the war progressed, the radar operators' sense of purpose only deepened. They were no longer just technicians or engineers. They were guardians, protectors of the nation's skies, the silent sentinels who stood watch over Britain's future. And as we reflect on their quiet role, it's important to remember that their work was not just about the technology. It was about the people, the quiet men and women who devoted themselves to a cause much larger than themselves. They weren't fighting on the front lines. They weren't flying the planes or making the big decisions. But they were making a difference, and in ways that no one could have predicted. So as we leave the radar rooms for now, let your mind linger for a moment on those quiet figures. Picture them, hunched over their screens, their fingers dancing across buttons, their eyes flicking between the radar blips. In their hands, the fate of Britain rests, like the pulse of a heart, steady, rhythmic, and ever-present. The shift has begun, and it is a shift that will be felt across the skies, in the hearts of the pilots above, and in the quiet rooms below. The radar's role is no longer a novelty. It is the lifeline, the pulse of a nation, guiding the way to safety. The Battle of Britain may still be raging, but in the background, there is a calm certainty that the quiet, unseen power of radar is now at the heart of the defense. The morning light is beginning to break through the windows, spilling a soft golden hue across the quiet radar room. The steady hum of the radar machines fills the space, almost like a lullaby, a familiar sound that has come to signify so much more than just technology. In this quiet room, surrounded by the flickering screens and the soft buzzing of machines, lives are changing. The future is unfolding in these moments, and it is all driven by the invisible forces at work. The gentle hum of the radar, the operator's steady hands, and the silent strength of the towers that stand tall against the sky. For the pilots above, the day ahead will be filled with danger and uncertainty, but they too are guided by the steady rhythm of the radar. Imagine being one of those pilots, hurtling through the skies at high speed, clouds swirling around you as you scan the horizon. The world is vast and empty, a seemingly endless expanse of air and space. But in the back of your mind, there's a quiet confidence. The radar is watching. The radar will guide you. You see, for all the drama of aerial combat, the sharp dive of enemy fighters, the roar of the engines, the sharp sting of anti-aircraft fire, it is the quiet moments, the calm before the storm, that often make the difference between life and death. And in this battle, it was the radar operators, hidden away in their quiet rooms, who provided the crucial information that turned the tide. The radar, with its soft hum and steady pulse, was the unseen eye in the sky, the silent sentinel that saw what others could not. But this wasn't a one-way relationship. It wasn't just about the radar guiding the pilots. It was a partnership, a delicate dance between the radar operators and the RAF pilots, each one depending on the other for survival. The operators, with their trained eyes and sharp instincts, would detect the incoming threats, but it was the pilots who would take to the skies, their wings cutting through the air to confront the danger head-on. Imagine the scene as a radar operator spots an incoming enemy aircraft on the screen. The soft click of a button, the steady voice on the radio, and the information is sent to the RAF pilots. They're already in the air, and thanks to the radar's guidance, they know exactly where to go. It's as though the radar is their map, and the pilots are the navigators, following the unseen path that will lead them to the enemy. The relationship between the radar operators and the pilots was one of trust. The pilots had to trust that the information they were receiving was accurate, that the radar operators had read the signals correctly. But the operators too had to trust the pilots. They had to trust that their information would be put to good use, that the pilots would act swiftly and decisively when the time came. It was a quiet understanding, a bond built on the knowledge that both sides were fighting for the same cause, for the same survival. In the heat of battle, it was the radar that helped the pilots make those critical decisions. Should they turn left? Should they dive? The radar signals were the guiding hand, telling them where the enemy was, how many there were, and which direction they were heading. The pilots didn't have time to question the information. They had to act fast, but they trusted the radar's guidance. And as the battle raged on, the radar grew more and more accurate, its signals sharper, its guidance more reliable. It's remarkable, isn't it? How something so invisible, so quiet, can have such a profound impact. The radar didn't roar like an engine or fire like a gun. It simply pulsed, sending out invisible waves into the air. It didn't shout its importance from the rooftops. It simply did its job, silently and steadily, day after day. And yet, in its quiet way, it was the foundation upon which the entire Battle of Britain was fought. Picture yourself once again in that radar room, the soft light from the screens casting long shadows on the walls. You're watching, waiting, listening for the faintest hint of an incoming aircraft. The world outside may be filled with noise, with the roar of engines and the shouts of battle. But here, in this room, everything is quiet. Everything is measured. There is a calm in the storm, a steady rhythm that runs through everything. The radar pulses, the operators listen, and the pilots prepare for action. Each radar blip is a potential enemy, but it is also an opportunity. It's a chance to strike first, a chance to protect Britain's skies, to keep the invaders at bay. The pilots, guided by the radar's information, move with purpose, cutting through the clouds, their engines roaring to life as they chase down the threat. The radar operators watch, listening for more signals, always on the alert, ready to provide more information as the battle continues. And yet, in all of this, there's a strange quietness, a peace amidst the chaos. The radar doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't demand anything. It simply works, quietly and relentlessly. And for those who understand its power, there is a certain comfort in that. The radar is the steady hand in the storm, the calm amidst the roar. As the battle moves from one phase to the next, the radar continues to guide the pilots, and the operators continue their watch. There's a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that the work they're doing matters, that each pulse, each signal, is helping to protect their country, to keep their families safe. And though the public may not know their names, though they may remain unseen in the shadows of history, the operators know the truth. They are the silent warriors, the ones who help turn the tide. There's a certain poetry to this, don't you think? How in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, it's the quiet, unseen forces that rise to meet the challenge. The radar, with its soft hum and steady pulse, was one of those forces. And as the skies above Britain filled with the roar of battle, the radar remained a constant, a steady presence in the chaos, guiding the way forward. As the days slip by, the hum of the radar stations becomes a constant presence in the air, a soft, steady pulse that mirrors the rhythm of life itself. The skies above Britain remain restless, with the echo of distant bombers and the sharp shriek of fighters still ringing in the air. But there's a subtle shift happening, a quiet change that can be felt in the very fabric of the air. The Battle of Britain has raged on for weeks, each day bringing its own share of triumphs and losses. But something is different now. The tide is turning. For the radar operators in their quiet rooms, the work has become second nature. The screens before them flicker with the same steady rhythm, the blips appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye. Each pulse, each wave, is another moment of clarity in the midst of the storm. The radar, once a novel and uncertain technology, has proven its worth. It is no longer just an instrument, it is the cornerstone of Britain's defence. Imagine for a moment the atmosphere in one of those radar rooms. The screens glow softly in the dim light, the faint hum of the machines filling the air. There's a quiet intensity, an unspoken understanding that every moment is critical. The air is thick with concentration, but there's also a sense of calm, a quiet confidence. The operators know that what they're doing matters. They can feel it in their bones, in the way their fingers hover over the buttons, in the way their eyes never leave the screen. The information they provide will help guide the RAF pilots, will steer them toward victory. And though the work may be invisible to the outside world, it's no less important. As the battle progresses, the radar operators begin to sense the shift. The enemy bombers are not coming in as often. The fighters that once swooped in from every direction now seem less frequent. And when the radar does pick up signals, there's a familiar rhythm to them, a pattern that's starting to feel like a victory in itself. The pilots, guided by the steady pulses of the radar, are intercepting the bombers more efficiently. The enemy is being pushed back. Slowly but surely the skies are being reclaimed. The RAF pilots, those brave men and women who have fought tirelessly in the air, have come to rely on the radar for one simple reason. It works. Without the radar, their missions would be like shooting in the dark, guessing where the enemy might be, hoping they could catch them in time. But with radar, they know. They know exactly where to go. They know when the enemy is near. They know when to strike. It's a quiet partnership, isn't it? The radar towers, standing tall against the sky, their silent pulses reaching out into the ether, guiding the pilots above. And yet, despite the significance of the radar, it remains unseen by most. The operators, too, remain in the background, their roles largely uncelebrated. And yet, their work is no less crucial. In many ways, it is the quiet triumphs of the radar operators that make all the difference. Their ability to see what others cannot, to guide the pilots through the fog of war, and to offer a steady hand in the midst of chaos. As the days stretch on, the enemy's assault begins to falter. The Luftwaffe, once so confident in their ability to bomb Britain into submission, are now on the defensive. The radar stations have provided the RAF with a vital edge, allowing the pilots to anticipate the movements of the enemy, to intercept bombers and fighters with precision. And with each passing day, Britain grows stronger, its defences more secure. But this victory isn't just about the pilots in the sky or the radar operators on the ground. It's about the teamwork that has emerged between them. It's about the trust that has developed, the quiet understanding that each side is playing a crucial role in the battle. The radar doesn't fight in the skies, but it gives the pilots the tools they need to fight. The pilots don't man the radar stations, but they rely on the information the operators provide. Together, they form a seamless partnership, a bond that is built on quiet communication, on trust, and on a shared goal. The Battle of Britain may be nearing its end, but the legacy of radar is just beginning to take shape. As the war continues, the role of radar will only grow more significant. It will become a vital part of Britain's defence strategy, and soon it will be used in countless other battles around the world. But for now, as the skies over Britain begin to clear, there is a moment of quiet reflection. The radar has played its part, the operators have done their duty, and together they have helped Britain survive. Imagine the quiet relief that must have settled over those radar rooms as the final days of the Battle of Britain unfolded. The tension that had hung heavy in the air, the weight of responsibility that the operators had carried on their shoulders, began to lift. The enemy, once so formidable, had been repelled. The skies, once filled with the roar of bombers and the shriek of fighter jets, were beginning to quiet. The war was far from over, but this battle, this crucial battle, had been won. And as the radar operators left their stations at the end of the day, there was a sense of quiet pride in their hearts. They may not have been on the front lines, but they had played a part in winning the war. Their contributions were no less vital than the pilots who soared through the skies above. And in the quiet of the radar rooms, they could rest knowing they had done their job, had kept watch when others could not. The radar had been the eyes in the dark, the silent sentinels watching over Britain's future, guiding the way to victory. The Battle of Britain has passed, its roar fading into history, but the hum of the radar remains. There's a quiet satisfaction that comes with victory, isn't there? A sense of peace that settles over the land once the fighting has ceased. The skies, which were once filled with the noise of war, now seem still, as if the very air is catching its breath. And in the background, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint echo of the radar's pulse, like the steady beat of a heart that has kept the nation alive through its darkest hour. For those who manned the radar stations, for those who sat in those quiet rooms, the aftermath was a moment of reflection. The world may have moved on, and the skies may have returned to their usual calm, but the role they had played was not forgotten. It was the radar, after all, that had provided the edge. It was the operators, with their quiet vigilance, that had guided the pilots, turning the tide of battle and helping Britain stand strong when the odds seemed impossible. The legacy of radar in the Battle of Britain would be remembered for years to come, though the radar operators themselves remained largely unseen, their names unknown to most. But in the quiet rooms of those stations, the impact of their work would live on in the knowledge that they had helped preserve not just the skies, but the very essence of a nation's will to survive. After the battle, the role of radar became even more clear. Its use in Britain's defense would continue to evolve, growing more sophisticated as technology advanced. The world would soon see the development of more advanced radar systems that would help protect against threats from the air, the sea, and beyond. But the Battle of Britain would remain a defining moment, a time when radar proved its worth and became a key component of Britain's defense strategy. But let's take a moment to reflect on the operators themselves, the men and women who sat in those darkened rooms, who spent hours scanning the screens, listening for that faintest hint of an incoming aircraft. They weren't soldiers, they weren't pilots, and yet they were just as essential. Their work wasn't glamorous. It wasn't filled with dramatic moments or stories of heroism. It was quiet, steady, and often thankless. But it was no less important. They were the silent heroes of the war, the ones who guided the fighters above, the ones who helped turn the tide in a battle that could have ended very differently. Imagine them as the war came to a close. Perhaps there was a sense of relief, a quiet pride in knowing that their efforts had contributed to a victory. And yet, there was no celebration, no fanfare, only the soft hum of the radar continuing to pulse, continuing to watch over the skies. The world had changed, and so had they. They had become a part of history, though most would never know their names. They had helped write the story of Britain's survival, a story written not in headlines or medals, but in the quiet, steady pulse of radar. In the years that followed, the radar technology would go on to play a key role in future conflicts, in air defense systems across the globe, and in the very way nations defended themselves. But it all began here, in the quiet rooms of Britain's radar stations. where the faintest blip on a screen could change the course of history. And as we reflect on this quiet victory, it's worth noting how often history's greatest triumphs occur in silence. The loudest battles are not always the ones that are won. Sometimes the greatest victories are those that are achieved in the background, in the shadows, where the unsung heroes work tirelessly to protect a future they may never fully see. It's in the quiet hum of the radar, in the soft clicking of buttons, in the steady focus of the operators that Britain found its strength. So as the radar machines continue their silent watch over the skies, we remember that this quiet legacy is one of resilience, of innovation, and of an unspoken dedication that played a key role in the survival of a nation. The radar may have been invisible to the public eye, but its impact was felt deeply, and the people who worked with it, though their names are lost to time, will always be remembered by those who understand the true nature of victory. And so, as we close this chapter, let these memories of silent triumph settle into your mind. May the quiet watch of the radar, the gentle hum of its pulse, guide you into peaceful dreams. For sometimes, it's the smallest things, the softest sounds, that have the greatest impact on our lives. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey through history. If you found yourself drifting off into a peaceful rest, let me know below. Sweet dreams, and may the stillness of this story linger with you as you enter into your own serene sleep. Until next time, my friends, rest easy and let the world outside grow quiet. Good night.